Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of the Essential Air Service podcast. Today, I have a special guest joining us. He is a writer for the website Airline Geeks and runs his own YouTube channel, Gerardi Aviation Photography. Good morning, Joey.
Morning, Stephen. How are you?
Excellent. How about yourself?
You know, normal college tiredness, but other than that, pretty good.
I know the feeling. So today we got a lot of exciting news. The Essential Air Service business has been going through quite a few changes, some major announcements recently. So since this is episode 1, we'll go over how this is going to look like. We'll start off with some of the bigger news across the airline industry and specifically with anything regarding Essential Air Service. And then we're going to take a look at the contracts that are going to be coming up across the next few months. We're going to pay special attention to the 29 communities that SkyWest is dropping and our predictions for who's going to take the lead in the Essential Air Service market. Back probably over a decade ago, Great Lakes had the most contracts in the industry, and eventually as Great Lakes started to fall, SkyWest took the crown. They currently have the most Essential Air Service contracts with nearly 60 contracts across the United States. Now, because of the effects of the pandemic, they are going to be dropping about half of the cities they're serving. So we'll go ahead and start off with that first big piece of news. SkyWest a few months ago made the major announcement that they are dropping their frequencies from Plattsburgh and Ogdensburg from their contracted 12 weekly round trips to Washington Dulles and dropping them down to 7 weekly round trips. And then they followed up with an announcement that they're going to be completely dropping those two cities. It was a big announcement, an interesting one, too, for those two specific contracts. Then they made some further announcements that they're going to be dropping half of their Essential Air Service contract. And in the meantime, there's going to be a service frequency change from their 12 weekly contracted flights to their destinations down to 10 weekly flights. And then, Joey, you probably know this more than I do, but what came first? When they started to announce the tag flights, did that come first, or did they announce first that they were dropping these communities?
So it's interesting because, other than the bulk city announcement they had, it was Ogdensburg and Plattsburgh, both in upstate New York. And like you said, it was first they announced the dropping service for those two cities, and neither of those cities are close enough where it makes sense to kind of link them together. So they announced they're dropping those down to 10, and then they said we're dropping them down to 7, which obviously is major for those two places because they went from having twice daily service on most days to only having daily service. Mm-hmm. And for the other 29 cities, it was kind of simultaneous. They said, hey, we're going to be reducing you down from 12 to 10, but also we're going to be tagging those 10 flights with other cities. And today is actually the first day that those tag flights begin.
Yeah, you brought up a great point with that. I didn't even notice that day was coming up. And I'm surprised how many cities. I believe the list says there's 18 cities that they are going to be using as tag flights. So basically, some flights will be going through one community before going to their large hub as contractually scheduled. What is your opinion on the reason that they chose Ogdensburg and Plattsburgh before these other ones? Because I'll have to take a look, but I don't think these were low-performing markets.
Prior to the pandemic, and it's kind of weird because both of those cities, those were both served prior to the pandemic. And Ogdensburg even had once daily to Dulles, and then the plane would continue on to Chicago O'Hare. So they actually had Chicago O'Hare and Chicago O'Hare and Washington Dulles. They actually served both of those up until, I want to say, fall of 2021. And I think the pandemic was a big burden for those two cities specifically, because Ogdensburg and Plattsburgh, for those of you that aren't familiar with upstate New York and the geography, which I'm sure most are not with these small cities, Plattsburgh and Ogdensburg are both located along the United States-Canadian border. Ogdensburg, you actually fly over Canada as you're on final into Ogdensburg, and the border crossing is less than 5 miles away from that airport. Plattsburgh's a little bit further, but they're still located not more than an hour and a half away from Montreal, which is a major Canadian capital city. And I think the pandemic has, like I said, it really hurt those two cities in particularly because of the major Canadian traffic that they got. And up until I think maybe a couple weeks ago or even this week, Canadians had to get COVID tested when they go back to Canada. And at the time of this podcast recording or filming, you still have to get a negative COVID test when you come into the United States, whether it's by air or it's by land or boat or whatever. And that has been a major, major difficulty for those two cities, and one of the reasons why Allegiant served Ogdensburg and Plattsburgh prior to the pandemic to multiple cities. Ogdensburg, they expanded their terminal, lengthened their runway, even moved part of the highway so they could expand that runway. And in the early days of the pandemic, Allegiant said, okay, we're going to suspend service. We'll hopefully be back. And to this point, they have said they're going to suspend service indefinitely because they just do not know when or if they're ever going to go back to Ogdensburg. Plattsburgh has a little bit more traffic, so they have remained there, but it's a lot less than before. But Spirit has left Plattsburgh.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. And do you think that the airlines, by doing this, are saying they're not projecting that they're going to get that same Canadian traffic through these airports?
I think eventually, well, that I'm sure that is what the airlines were thinking originally, because even now you still need, or at the time of this was recording, you still need a negative COVID test to come into the United States by land or by air. And that has just been a major, I'm not afraid of obviously everybody should be cautious to some level of degree, but that is one of the reasons why I haven't traveled internationally, is because not so much my health status, but I don't want to book a trip and then internationally and then have a negative or have a positive COVID test, and then all of a sudden I'm not allowed to travel, especially because all these airlines, as the pandemic winds down, hopefully, airlines have kind of dropped their thought process of, hey, you can cancel your trip free of charge if there's a COVID issue. 99% of airlines, if not all of them, have dropped that mindset. So if you have a positive COVID test and you miss that flight, or you can't get on that flight and cross the border, you're kind of out of luck. And that's why
Absolutely.
A lot of people, and that's why a lot of people still haven't gone back into international travel. And even in the week and a half since the Canadian government announced you no longer need a negative COVID test, there has been a massive increase in bookings for Canadian destinations because of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's a great point. Plattsburgh gets a lot of traffic from Montreal because that's just straight north of the city. And I read some local articles. They've invested a lot of money into that terminal to attract these bigger airlines. And it sounds like they want to attract international airlines. With these new challenges, especially with Allegiant minimizing their travel, United dropping out of the market, do you think that they're going to be able to attract these international airlines like they want to?
So Ogdensburg, definitely not. I love Ogdensburg. It's a nice little airport, but that airport just does not have the setup for international flights, except maybe with the exception of something cross-border, just over to Canada. But even then, it's still reduced. Plattsburgh has 4 or 5 jetways. That's a big airport considering what they have. They have Allegiant, a couple times a week. And at this present time, they have, twice or I guess now once daily service to Washington Dulles on a 50-seat jet. But this terminal and this airport, they have, I don't know if you have looked at the airport, what's it called? The airport statistics. They have one runway at that airport, and it is over 11,500 feet long. It used to be an old military base, and that main runway is 11,700 feet, and more than that. So that runway can definitely support the international traffic, but whether or not it's going to happen, I don't know to this point. Somewhere down the road, we could end up having that, especially with the big event happening up in that area next winter. If you're not aware of it, the World Olympic University Games, which is essentially the equivalent of the Olympics but for college students, it's being held in Lake Placid next winter and next February, and Plattsburgh has been named the official entry point for that event. So that airport and that event could be the sign of what could possibly happen.
Yeah, I did not hear about that. Lake Placid, that's near Saranac Lake, which I believe Cape Air holds the contract, correct?
Yes, Saranac Lake. Oh. Their runway is not. Their runway is not that big. It's a lot bigger than the airport in Lake Placid, which is just a small municipal general aviation airport. The longest runway at Saranac Lake is around 6,500 feet. That's not that long, but it can support a 757 if it's not completely loaded. And there have been 757s that have landed there before. I think Air Force One the 757 version of Air Force One has landed there at some point in the past. But for overseas flights, that is probably going to be either Plattsburgh, or those people may end up flying into New York and, busing up to Lake Placid. But that brings up the next point. Right now, Contour is set to fly into Plattsburgh, and they have worked with that community to get that alternate EAS. Ogdensburg's also working with Contour, but that contract and that agreement has yet to come into the public. But I assume it's going to be Contour as well. That runway is not that bad, and I would love for it to happen. Will it happen? I don't know, but I could possibly see Contour setting up a possible very, very seasonal operation, or someone else setting up a very seasonal operation that lasts for maybe a month or 2 months into Saranac Lake from somewhere in the Northeast, because all of those event coordinators, the athletes, the families, the spectators, they all have to get to Lake Placid somehow, and Saranac Lake is the closest airport with a relatively large runway that's 6,500 feet or more.
Something reasonable.
Yeah, exactly. And this, or set something up similar to what Jet Suite X or JSX has done with Cabo, very seasonal public charter flights that run, on the weekends or 2 times for the year, or 2 times throughout the year. I could see some airline possibly launching that into Saranac Lake during the time of that game happening. And I would love to see that. But in reality, 3 times daily on a 9-seat propeller plane is just not enough to get people in and out of that community during the games.
Yeah. And imagine being a local and trying to get a flight to Boston or back. That's not going to be or I believe they started New York flights now. So that's going to be
right. Yep. That airport has been trying to do that for years, and they finally did it. And that's actually the only EAS route that operates out of John F. Kennedy or anywhere in the New York City area since Presque Isle moved their essential air service to Dulles, that Saranac Lake flight is now the only EAS route out of the New York City area.
Wow. And I just pulled up the statistics for the Plattsburgh airport, and back in 2019, they had a record year, which 125,000 enplanements. This past year, 2021, they ended with 40,000 enplanements. So you can definitely see a huge drop in market, even as travel bookings is increased. In fact, the 2021 was actually less people they had in 2020. So you can definitely see that market struggling, and it brings up another interesting point. Even with Allegiant operating these few times a week flights, they're still getting way more traffic than a daily United Express aircraft. So the question is, how necessary is essential air service in the market? Would it be better for the community to pursue other carriers, maybe carriers like Breeze or Avelo, to that market instead of trying this essential air service, which is costing a lot of money and is not even as effective as their at-risk service?
Right. Yeah, and so Ogdensburg's case, they probably do need it because they're still kind of secluded. They're along the Canadian border, and the other closest cities to Ogdensburg are Messina, which is an hour and a half north with no highways, and then Watertown, which is another hour and a half south, not on highways, all of which, Ogdensburg, Messina, and Watertown, they're all EAS cities. Mm-hmm. So you have all of these cities that are not that big. So Ogdensburg does kind of need that, but like you said, Plattsburgh is kind of in that position. They're about an hour and a half from Burlington, Vermont. Obviously, that's not a big city either, but they're not far from an airport that does have some substantial service. And like you said, I completely support the EAS program, but for some airports, it brings up the question whether or not they are close enough to these other medium airports where they really need it.
Exactly.
Plattsburgh being close to Burlington. I can't think of what I was going to say next, but you know what I mean.
Exactly. There are these mm-hmm. small airports with other air carriers that are not only, it's not that there are other air carriers, they're actually outperforming, doubling, if not even tripling or more, the traffic loads that these essential air service are doing daily. So that's definitely an interesting point, and something I believe the DOT views is you need at least those 12 round trips. You need that daily performance. But the question is that really necessary when you get connectivity with these other carriers? They may not always be going to a large hub, but they're still getting more traffic than these smaller regional jets.
Right. I disagree with part of that. Like you said, they are getting a lot more traffic on Allegiant, but I think at some point they do need to have service to some of these communities. Plattsburgh, I think they should at least get once daily funded on something, just because it is an hour and a half from Burlington, but there are still people that need to get to these bigger cities for medical or doctor's appointments, or even to connect elsewhere in the country's air system. But to have a carrier like Allegiant or even Spirit that does offer connecting flights to fly, 3-4 times a week to a place that's 3 hours away, I don't think, yes, that is a flight, but I think they should be connecting to relatively close hubs. Mm-hmm. But there are some cities that definitely do not need this EAS service.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's going to be definitely interesting to see if the DOT will approve these alternate essential air service. Both communities want the service to Contour. The proposal is to fly there twice daily, same as SkyWest, with service to Philadelphia. Contour does have an American Airlines interline agreement for transferring bags and through ticketing. So that brings these communities to a large American Airlines hub. For the rest of these communities, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, And in the beginning, when they first announced Plattsburgh and Ogdensburg, it was kind of like, oh crap, SkyWest is stopping, or they want to stop service here. That's so horrible. Yes, that's horrible, but those two cities kind of lucked out in that they were first, because you have all of these, 29 other EAS cities that SkyWest is dropping, 90% of which are going, oh, we're reaching out to airlines. We want to get jet service. We need jet service. We need the traffic, or we have this traffic that supports jet service. We should have jet service. I'm going to say 80% or even 60% of these cities are not, 80 or 90% of these cities within that 29 group are not going to be getting jet service back, just because that is such a large quantity of cities at the exact same time. Ogdensburg and Plattsburgh kind of lucked out that they were at the front of the pack, and it happened before everyone else. It gave them a chance to ask Contour. Contour, I'm guessing, does not have this capacity to serve all 29 of these cities, and I'm sure no one EAS carrier has the capacity to fly to all 29. But 80 or 90% of these EAS cities that are losing SkyWest service are not going to have jet service come middle summer.
Exactly. That's going to be an interesting. That's going to be interesting to see even which airlines propose which communities. As you said, they don't have unlimited resources. Right now, the proposals for the airlines bidding on these SkyWest routes, the proposals are due on April 11th, which is coming here just over a week. SkyWest claims that these issues are sourced from a nationwide pilot shortage. SkyWest has the largest fleet of CRJ-200 aircraft in the world, and for a while they are actually one of the most reliable regional jet services. They won numerous awards, and they contract all their services with the larger airlines, be it United, American, Delta, or Alaska. So my question to you also, you've done a lot of research on Essential Air Service. What do you think this means for SkyWest, the future of their CRJ-200 aircraft, as well as the future of how they're going to be bidding Essential Air Service contracts, or if they will, in the future?
All right, so I'll start with the first part of that question, what that means for the CRJ-200. United has said multiple times that they plan on phasing out their 50-seat or their CRJ-200 fleet at some point in the near future, and that's kind of evident from this, and it also brings up another. So I'll start with this first. And Delta has extended their life, or they've announced the CRJ-200 will remain in their fleet until 2026. So you got United saying they want to get rid of them within a year or 2 years, and then Delta that's saying, okay, we're going to make them last another 4 years. So the CRJ-200 on the Delta side is probably going to stick around for a little bit longer, but we all know how fast things can change. So whether or not they get moved up, I don't know. And that also brings up another point. So including these 29 or 31 cities that are being dropped, SkyWest operates to a total of 55 EAS, roughly 55 Essential Air Service cities in the country. 40 of them are on United, or on United, they're branded United Express. 15 of them are branded Delta Connection. All of the cities that are being dropped are all United contracted, or all under the United Express brand. So that brings up another interesting question is, and I'd love to somehow hear from SkyWest. Obviously, they're probably not going to respond to us, but
yeah, we need to follow up with them.
Right, that brings up another interesting question. If you're having a pilot shortage, why is it that all of the 31 cities you're dropping, or that you're requesting to drop, are all United branded destinations, which means they're bringing the United branded destinations down to just 9, all of which are, all of which are west of the Mississippi River, and most of them are actually west of Denver. The only contracts they'll really have east of their Denver hub are in North Dakota, and even then it's not that far, and then the outlier in Presque Isle, Maine. but Presque Isle, Dickinson, North Dakota, Cody, and there's a couple others. Actually, I believe those are the three. Those contracts are United, not SkyWest, not, any of their affiliates. It's United branded contracts and the contracts that United holds, which means they can serve them with whichever aircraft they want to from any hub they want to, which is why Presque Isle's air service has been changing so frequently. First it was Dulles, then they moved it up to Newark on the E-145, and then they said, okay, we're moving it back to Dulles because of slot restrictions at Newark. And Delta also operates 15 cities, or 15 cities operate under the Delta brand. And it's just a little odd that if SkyWest is one company and they all have pilots, they're training for the same aircraft, why is it that these cities are being dropped? I think United has to have some input on what cities they're dropping. And it's not cities that necessarily have low traffic loads, because a couple of these EAF cities do have relatively high loads, like Fort Leonard Wood. I'm pretty sure there's a military base near there. So they get a lot of traffic, and so do a lot of these other EAF cities. But it just brings up an interesting point. Why are all of the 31 cities SkyWest is requesting to leave? They're all United Express branded cities.
Absolutely. You bring up a great point there. And this is going to leave a big opportunity for some of the current carriers that have been trying to gain a lead in the essential air service market to pick up a lot of these contracts. Southern we'll bring up in a little bit. They made the big acquisition of Air Choice One, which is going to increase their Caravan fleet. Denver Air Connection has been increasing their Embraer fleet, and they snuck into the Pierre and Watertown contracts just by having a lower subsidy. So it's going to be interesting to see which airlines are going to propose which contracts and how that's going to change up the diversity of the different air carriers that are participating in essential air service.
Right, so, and it's weird for a lot of these. It's funny because when SkyWest bids these cities, they like to undercut. I mean, they don't always undercut the competition, but they bid the subsidy a lot lower on a jet than they do with these small carriers, so that SkyWest can all of a sudden get all these cities and gain all these cities. And I just find it really weird that they were bidding new destinations up until, the fall, and that they didn't see this coming, and there wasn't even the littlest sign that this was happening. They were bidding, and they even started a couple of new cities in the past couple of months. Fort Leonard Wood, they recently got SkyWest. They went from Contour. They had Contour for the longest time, and they went to SkyWest, I believe, in the past year or so, or even in the past 6 months. But now, all of a sudden, oops, SkyWest is out of pilots, or they're low on pilots, or whatever they were saying the quote was, or whatever they're saying the reason was. And now, all of a sudden, they need another airline. And will they get Contour back? I don't really know, because like I said, there's no one airline that is going to have the capacity, whether it's pilots or aircraft availability, to take all 29 cities.
Yeah, I like you brought that up. That was going to be one of my next talking points. SkyWest was bidding heavily on essential air service contracts, pretty much trying to get any market that could theoretically support regional jet service. And they picked up, I think, at least over a dozen contracts since COVID started. And they proposed many more. What are your thoughts on that? Was that a good idea? Do you think they just didn't foresee this pilot shortage? What happened here?
It's tough because a lot of I don't think they saw this. And honestly, I think there should have been, I don't know if it's the pilot shortage is due to COVID or just a lot of people randomly leaving all of a sudden, but like you said, they have picked up a lot of cities, and a lot of these destinations that are now being dropped have been picked up, over the pandemic or just before the pandemic. Alamosa, Fort Dodge, Mason City, Decatur, Fort Leonard Wood. A lot. I'm sure there's a couple other, but those are off the top of my head. Those are cities that SkyWest has picked up in the past, 36 months since the pandemic began. And it's just really unusual that, especially like Fort Leonard Wood, that one was in the last 6 months or so, and now all of a sudden they have to leave with SkyWest, and if not go back to Contour, go back to, a propeller carrier. And I think this is one of those times where their decision to, we want the big carrier because they have connectivity. I think this is one of those times where that decision is going to bite them back in the butt.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And this is going to be an opportunity for some carriers that have been struggling. We were talking before about this is an opportunity for Air Choice One up until the point that you made the major announcement that Southern Airways Express has acquired regional carrier Air Choice One. They've been struggling for the last few years. They've been dropping route by route. They used to have a very strong coverage across the Midwest, and they actually were very good performers. Every article that I've read from the local communities had nothing but good things to say about Air Choice One. Great connections with the community. If you look at the performance, the enplanements they got, they really had a strong load factor and really good relations once again with the people that they serve. And the biggest problem was the connectivity. They made a few announcements that they were working on an interline agreements over the years, over the last decade really, and nothing materialized. So a lot of these other carriers that had these code shares or interline agreements eventually took over. Boutique got Ironwood, which is now with Denver Air Connection. Fort Dodge and Mason City went to the regional jet service. Jackson to Boutique Air. And now they're down to their one essential air service contract in Jonesboro, Arkansas, which under the announcement you made will be under the Southern brand if everything is approved under the DOT. So, Joey, you talked a lot with Southern, some of their senior management about this acquisition. What does this mean for the future of Southern and their fleet?
Well, Air Choice One is predominantly Cessna 208s, and like you said, they're down to just the one EAS city, and they actually started another route out of that city, and I didn't even know about it till recently. It went completely unseen by the news or anyone. They randomly started also serving Jonesboro, Arkansas to Nashville. So they do have those three cities. But so back to that question, Air Choice One is predominantly Cessna 208s, which is the same fleet type that Southern Air, most of their fleet is made up of. So that is going to fold and mesh really nicely with Southern Airways Express. The one or two Beech 1900s that Air Choice One does have, they plan on getting rid of those. Southern Airways, I'm just going to say SAE because that's a lot shorter. SAE just got, or they're getting Saab 340s for their Hawaiian operation after the pull out of Ohana by Hawaiian. And to have another fleet type in there doesn't really make sense. And Southern even has said, okay, we just got this other plane, and the Beech 1900 doesn't make sense for our operation. So they plan on phasing those out at some point in the very near future. But honestly, I see no problem with the two fleets meshing, and I honestly don't foresee, and Southern said the same thing, but I'm going to say the same thing too, because I agree with it. I don't see the Department of Transportation rejecting this at all, because with the exception of the Cessna 208, their network doesn't overlap at all, and Air Choice One only has 3 cities at all anyways. So there's really decreased competition, but there's no really competition to begin with because they're essential air service. So there is no competition in these cities.
And even when they were bidding these contracts over the last year, trying to get another route, very few communities even mentioned Air Choice One, much less considered them as an option for their community. So they were just holding by a string.
Yeah, and like you said, that lack of code shares, interline, baggage agreements, whatever, that is what is killed and has killed that airline. And all the EAS contracts that they've bid, like you said, in the community comments, they don't have baggage agreements. They don't have interline. People do not want to go from a small city like Mason City or Fort Dodge. They don't want to fly to Chicago and then have to leave security and recheck their bags. Mm-hmm. So having that baggage agreement and that interline on that same ticket so you don't have to leave security and recheck stuff, that is a big deal. And like you said, Air Choice One, they kept saying, oh, we're working on it. Oh, it's in the works. It never materialized. And since then, other airlines, these other commuter airlines have been increasing the number of code shares they have. Southern Airways last summer got a United code share or interline baggage agreement. I want to say 4 years ago, Boutique got American. And all of these carriers are getting or currently have interline and baggage agreements. Air Choice One just kind of stuck with 0. And the only other carrier or commuter airline that has 0 interline and baggage agreements is Advanced Air, Hawthorne, California-based Advanced Air. And they only have 2 EAS cities, and they haven't really grown much past that. The second EAS city of which they got last summer. Or I'm sorry, they got
Advanced Air is a really unique model too.
Yes, it is.
But that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation, so I won't get into that. But with the exception of Advanced Air and their 2 lone EAS contracts, cities do not want airlines that have no interline or baggage agreements. Contour has American, Boutique has American and United. Southern Airways, they had United, American, and they actually have Alaska Airlines, which does help greatly since they operate those hubs in the Hawaiian Islands and also Los Angeles. That Alaska partnership is going to greatly help them out. Granted, the Hawaiian operation, they're not using TSA, so they will have to recheck bags, but having that same ticket does help if there are any delays or cancellations. If delays or cancellations happen and it's not on the same ticket, it's just the carrier views it as, oh, you missed your flight. Sorry, you forfeit the money. But if airlines see you're on the same ticket and they see another flight was delayed, they're like, oh, and they see exactly why your flight was delayed, and they do have a little bit of power to help you out. But with that interline, it's a big deal. And that is the reason they were down to 1 EAS city.
Exactly. And Air Choice One tried to differentiate their model. Instead of having an interline, they had that strong partnership with Choice Travel Agency. Fortunately, travel agencies are not the new and cool thing. Right. So it didn't really work for them. They made a bet and they lost on it. But this is a huge news for Southern, especially in the light of this SkyWest dropping all these communities. They've grown their scale significantly since they started up. As you mentioned, they acquired Mokulele. They acquired Makani Air and folded that into Mokulele's operation, keeping the Mokulele brand alive in Hawaii. And not only that, they've been operated at a very impressive operational reliability. So this is going to help them in that case and allow them to expand even further. Another carrier that's been that has a new opportunity to regain their status in the essential air service market is Boutique Air. They're another carrier that has been, they're not quite, Air Choice One was only 1 route, but they're getting close. They've lost a lot of routes over the last year. They lost Jackson due to reliability issue, Ironwood due to safety concerns and reliability, as well as a handful of other markets. This year they're going to lose Cortez, Sholo, now that Jackson is official, they will be losing that this year, and they'll be down to 4 routes. On top of that, they've been rebidding 2 of their contracts, Altoona and Pendleton, so there's a chance that they could lose those 2 as well.
Right.
So
that
hopefully for the airline.
And that's actually a really interesting conversation with Boutique Air. Even during the early days of the pandemic, they were going really strong. They had cities across the country. They had, all of these different EAS cities, and they even mid-2020 they started some non-funding, non-EAS cities, these at-risk cities, Burlington, Vermont, Norfolk, Palm Springs. They started popping up with all these cities, and I think at one point they had something like 23 or 24 cities they were serving. That's a lot of cities, and that was a lot of growth that they had so dramatically. And I don't know what happened, but it's like somebody that has anger issues and that controls it. They're controlling it, and one day something just snaps. I don't know what snapped, but something happened, and they started losing cities left and right. They stopped Palm Springs. They said Norfolk, oh, we're stopping it temporarily. And then they kind of dropped that. And then out of all these other EAS cities, they started adding random cities out of there, I think, to persuade, and other airline executives like Southern have even said, so Southern got Chadron, which was a former Boutique city. When I asked them if they'd be starting rapid city service like Boutique is, they basically said, no, Boutique only did that. And these aren't my words, these are Southern Airways Express words. They said, no, Boutique started that to try and sway the community to choose them. And it didn't work. And that's what they did from a lot of these cities. In Merced, they had Sacramento. From Merced, they served Sacramento and Los Angeles. And they started Las Vegas out of there as well. Merced, they lost to Advanced Air. Chadron, they had Denver out of there, and they started a 30 or maybe not even 30-minute flight to Rapid City, South Dakota. They lost Chadron to Southern Airways Express. Greenville, Mississippi, they had Nashville and Dallas service. They started New Orleans 3 times a week for some reason, and they lost Greenville. From all these cities, they are starting these random routes to try, and again, this is not my words, these are in the words of Southern Airways, they're starting these other cities to try and sway the communities to choose them. The only example that I can think of off the top of my head where it actually worked was Carlsbad, New Mexico. They serve Carlsbad from Dallas, Fort Worth, and Albuquerque. They started service to El Paso, Texas. It's not an airline hub by any means. The only airline that has any sizable operation is Southwest, which of course doesn't code share or interline with anybody. So that kind of doesn't really matter. And again, that route lasted for 4, maybe 5 months, and then gone. They started all of these cities non-subsidized, at risk. And like I said, I don't know what snapped, but something snapped. I don't know if it was maintenance. I don't know if it was pilot. But something with them snapped.
Yeah, I took a look at the route map as you were mentioning, just only from just over a year ago, and it's a night and day difference from where they were. In my opinion, just looking at the routes and just looking at their history, I should say, I think they grew too quickly. It was not sustainable. They got almost a dozen routes in a year alone, and ever since about 3 or 4 years ago, they've been declining. They got a couple contracts, but then they lost them. I believe that was Ironwood, and the other one's Jackson, and they lost both of those. So they really haven't gotten any new contracts since that big expansion they had a few years ago. I'm not sure if they read this. I actually found an article the other day on Burlington, which was supposed to be a seasonal route. And they stated that they're not going to be restarting it. I believe they stated crew issues or issues related to the pandemic. Regardless, there's
I
no
guess that's
plans to
another.
restart it soon.
So that's another one that's kind of down there. Oh, and Prescott. I just forgot about that one. They started serving. Prescott is actually an essential air service city served by SkyWest and United, and that's one of the cities they're not stopping. They serve there from Denver and Los Angeles, but that's another interesting aspect of this EAS city that actually has more than one carrier. From February of 21 to May of 21, they served Prescott, Arizona from Phoenix, hoping to, with American, the partnership and the interline, they hope to feed some of those passengers through the Sky Harbor hub in Phoenix. But again, so add Burlington. Oh, I just remembered another one. Redmond, Oregon. They started that one in October of 20. That stopped in July of 21. They also announced Eugene, Oregon, which never actually even started. So with all of these routes, not counting the routes they served before the pandemic, the EAS cities.
Yeah, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see.
Oh, I was going to say they started and ended 10 cities within, I want to say, a year and a half. Norfolk, that lasted 2 months. Chicago O'Hare, that lasted about a year, but Chicago and Ironwood, those are both contract related. Rapid City, South Dakota, that lasted a little bit longer. It lasted from February until, actually that lasted 3 months. Rapid City lasted 3 months. El Paso lasted, same thing. A lot of, actually now that I'm looking at it, most of these cities have the same pattern. They started in the winter time of 21, and a lot of them stopped around the spring of 21. Rapid City's February to April of 21, so was El Paso and Prescott. A lot of these cities are, February or January to April or May of 21, and I think that may be the time period when something snapped. Same thing for New Orleans, April to May of 21. Norfolk, January to November. So that one did last a little bit longer. But again, Eugene didn't even start at all. Palm Springs, Prescott. I love Boutique. I've flown them many times. I love flying on the PC-12. Everybody there is super nice. But I've gotten very lucky to not have a severely delayed flight due to mechanical reasons. The only real major delay I had was due to some weather in Nashville when I flew to Pensacola, Florida there a couple of years ago. But that's a lot of cities that have started and stopped within such a short time period. And it's just so interesting to see it. And with the pandemic, most airlines get the normal excuse of, oh, it's COVID reasons, or oh, it's pandemic reasons. I'm sure some of that is true as well, but there has to be something else going on for this much growth and decline to be happening in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, more systematic issues.
Right.
Yeah, and with Carlsbad, they actually transitioned the El Paso flights. When they dropped them, they added additional Dallas flights outside of their contracts. Only reason I know that is because that is the flight I took from Albuquerque to Dallas last summer, and that was one where I actually had I believe a 4 or maybe it was a 5-hour delay due to maintenance, which is a complaint that, I mean, if you read any boutique reviews, you see that very frequently, as well as the local articles from these communities. One of the biggest complaints is maintenance issues. And I believe I checked the recent schedule from Carlsbad, they dropped that extra Dallas trip, so they just have their 12 weekly to Albuquerque and 6 to Dallas.
Right. And a while ago you mentioned Southern Air, or Sholo is recommending Southern Air. Pendleton, Altoona, and Sholo. 3 completely different parts of the country. Pendleton's Oregon, Altoona's Pennsylvania, and Sholo's Arizona. all of those cities in the contract, when they requested for termination, they said in the contract, we are going to rebid, but at a higher price. I don't know the exact date of when those contracts were supposed to end before this. So if you know it, just let me know, because I don't know that.
Yeah, and actually one of the plans is we'll discuss Pendleton, Altoona specifically later on.
Okay. I was going to say, with those cities, they said in that contract that was posted, they plan on rebidding, but for a higher subsidy. Well, that is now biting them in the butt for Sholo, because now Sholo doesn't even want them. So it's one of those things where, yes, their current bid may have been a lot less than it should be with the current economic state of fuel and, all that other stuff, but now they're going to lose all of the subsidy money.
All right, and for the next section, we're going to go over just the standard essential air service predictions for the next contracts coming up. Currently, the next three are Sholo, Plattsburgh, and Garden City. Sholo, currently, the proposals have been out, and the city is recommending Southern, under Southern Airways Express, to be the new air service provider over current incumbent Boutique Air, who's been flying to Sholo for the 7 years to Phoenix. The biggest change will be the aircraft, changing from the Pilatus PC-12 to the Cessna Grand Caravan, which is an interesting choice considering the high elevation of Sholo, but it is still under 10,000, so it should still be plausible. We did talk about Plattsburgh earlier. That's one of those that were under bid when SkyWest made their announcement. They're still, I believe the last we heard is they submitted their alternate EAS proposal for contour service, 12 round trips to Philadelphia. So once again, that's another one. We're just waiting for the DOT to make an official selection. Garden City, there was only one proposal, the incumbent carrier, American Airlines, under their American Eagle brand, providing 12 weekly round trips to Dallas-Fort Worth. We talked about Alamosa too, so that brings us to Cortez, Colorado. The current carrier, Boutique Air, did not submit a proposal, which is very interesting considering the airline has been there for nearly 4 years. The two proposals that were released, and we'll put on the screen, is Denver Air Connection, which is offering, I believe, the Metroliner with the potential to upgrade to jet service if the airport receives their 139 certification, and Southern Airways Express, which proposed two options using either the King Air 200 series or the PC-12. The biggest difference is the cost. So Denver Air Connection's contract costs nearly twice the amount of Southern Airways Express. So, Joey, what's your thought on these, on the Cortez?
It's going to be very interesting to watch Cortez, see what happens. Because like we saw in Pierre and Watertown, South Dakota, both communities in both of those cities recommended SkyWest/United. And, well, first off, it's a good thing they didn't get SkyWest, because who knows, at this point they may not have them anyways. But so every single person, from my knowledge, in both of those communities recommended SkyWest for the contract. But same as in this case, SkyWest was, almost twice the amount of Denver Air Connection, and the DOT, the Department of Transportation, chose Denver Air Connection to operate the EAS contracts in Pierre and Watertown simply because of the cost. And one of the things they said in that contract, and I don't think that this is, I'm quoting this from memory, so it may not be the exact wording, but it was something along the lines of, this excessive cost cannot be justified as they're offering nearly the same service to the same cities, and Denver Air Connection has that United interline and baggage agreement. So that's why the DOT chose Denver Air Connection for Watertown and Pierre, simply because they were cheaper and they couldn't justify paying that much more money for nearly identical service offerings. And honestly, I think they're going to do the same thing in Cortez. I don't remember what I said when we were predicting all of those other cities, but whatever I said, ignore that. Because, so long answer short, I think they're just going to choose Southern Airways simply because it is, like you said, almost half the price of Denver Air Connection's bid, despite the community recommending Denver Air Connection.
Absolutely. And the only concern, and something we discussed before, is the issue of Chadron. They proposed to use the King Air 200, contractually got the order from the DOT, and they have been using a Cessna Caravan on that route for the last year. Now, looking at records from FlightAware, we can see that the airline has used the King Air 200 on a handful of flights, just under 5 or so. So do you think that's going to play a factor into the DOT's decision for Cortez?
I don't necessarily think it's going to play a factor in the DOT's decision, but I do have a feeling that that did play some consideration into the community's decision into why they recommended Denver Air Connection. But that also brings up another interesting point. To my knowledge, there is only one King Air that is painted in the Southern Airways livery, and I don't know how many other King Airs they currently have or in their possession, but from my knowledge, there's only one painted in the livery. And of course, they can fly a plane without the livery. That's no problem. It doesn't need to be painted a certain way. As we can look at Boutique's operation, I don't think they have a uniform livery. But that brings up another interesting point. If they have one or two King Airs and that aircraft gets chosen for Cortez, that brings up an interesting point of Cortez is in the mountains and can only be flown by the King Air. And if they only have one or two King Airs, if Cortez starts under the Southern Airways contract and they only have two of them, they're going to send them to Cortez because they're operationally required to go there, and the Cessna Caravan will not make it over that mountain range because they're unpressurized and they can't fly that high, because they're unpressurized. But that's going to bring up an interesting debate between those two communities. On one hand, you have Chadron that has been expecting that plane since day one, June of 2021. And then on the other hand, you have Cortez, and they operationally require a King Air or, a pressurized aircraft. So it's going to be really interesting if they don't get that King Air, or King Airs, plural, up and running, they're going to start to run into that.
Yeah, and if they get the contract, they're going to need more. I mean, 2 is theoretically, enough to run the contract, but that doesn't account for if one goes down for maintenance or scheduled inspections. You're going to need at least 3, if not more. And the King Airs, they're not as great as of a utility aircraft as the Caravan and the PC-12. They require a little extra care and attention to keep them up and running. So you're going to even want a few more spares on hand.
Yeah, they're going to need at least, and even for Chadron, I think the airline said they were going to plan on having 3 for that route, and that brings up another interesting point. Excuse me. If they need 3 for the Chadron route, or they planned on having 3, Cortez theoretically would be served from Denver and Phoenix, which means there's going to play a plane in one of 3 cities. They're going to need 3 airplanes for that route. When is that scheduled to start, the contract?
So Boutique's contract is currently ending in September 30th, and so the new carrier will begin October 1st.
Okay, so they have a little bit of time.
4 months out.
All right, so yeah, they have a little bit of time, but again, they've been planning Chadron for at least a year, I'm thinking, and they still don't have 1 or 2 King Airs even up and running. I know they got the 1, and I'm sure they have more, but
as of a few days ago, we were exactly 1 year into Southern Airways' 2-year contract for Chadron.
I believe Chadron started on June 1st. June 1st? Did it start June 1st? Or I don't know.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. May 31st was the end of the contract. So yeah, June 1st was the start. So
Okay, so
almost a year.
I mean, still, either way, that's still. They have definitely known about it for a full calendar year. So that brings up another point. They can't get the 1 or 2 King Airs, whatever, online for Shadron. And I understand they're saying, I think what I heard from Southern Air is they wanted to fly them with 2 pilots because it's safer. And they've been waiting for FAA certification, and they said, those planes are waiting in Shadron for when we get the certification. And that brings up the next point. Hey, DOT, if you're listening, what the heck is going on? How long does it take to say, yes, 2 pilots is definitely safer? Go for it. How long does it take to say that, yes, you are allowed to have a second pilot in there? Because honestly, it shouldn't be taking this long.
I wish it was simple as the DOT, but that is actually an FAA certification they need, and it still takes way too long to get it.
All right, so sorry, DOT, I just dissed you, but now FAA, get your act together, and I'm sure they've been working on, I don't know how long Southern has been working on this, but I'm guessing it's at least since last June, because that was when the contract was supposed to start.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that we talked about with the Part 135 operations. It's the way it's set up is it's single pilot with the option for 2, which I could understand if it's a small cargo operation, cost-efficient move. But 135 passenger operations, I think, should be 2 crew with the option for 1, because you're making airlines do more work to do something that's arguably safer.
Right.
I know that some airline executives, mainly the kicker Dan Wolf, thinks that 2 engines is more important than 2 crew, and I imagine you can argue either way and make a solid argument. But you can argue that 2 crew is safer than 1, especially with the workload alone. Any pilots will know that easily. Any passenger operation, having 2 pilots is very beneficial. And increases safety. So that's definitely a systematic issue that's impacting this carrier's ability to launch operations sooner than expected.
Right. So I think honestly it's 95% FAA's fault for not doing this a little quick. I know you said it takes some time, but it's been going on for a while. It's 95% the FAA's fault. And I'd say it's maybe 5% Southern's fault, because if they knew they were going to do this and they knew they were going to run into it, obviously they had to wait for the aircraft. So I understand that. But there had to be some sort of planning done beforehand. Again, I don't know what goes into that. I can't speak for the carrier, and I don't know the internal specifics of it. But that brings up the interesting point for Cortez. If you still don't have a King Air running and you start the service to Cortez, then you're crap out of luck, and that's the not dirty way of saying it, but you're crap out of luck, because now you have a destination where you operationally require a pressurized plane, unless you want to go all the way around the Rocky Mountains and fly 4 hours plus in a Cessna.
That's going to be an interesting situation that I imagine Southern is going to try avoiding at all costs. One of the options they could do, and I've only seen this a few times, I haven't seen anything too lengthy, but the Southern could explain the situation to DOT and ask for an extension, or work with Boutique on a date, a transition date. And that's what Advanced Air did when they started the Silver City contract. They weren't quite ready to go. I think January 1st is when their contract was supposed to start, so they had to delay their service for a couple weeks. I don't think the DOT did any contract. I think that was just a mutually agreed date for Boutique and Advance, and then they just got to fix with the DOT so they got their appropriate amount of money for their contract. But I imagine Southern may be able to do something with that if they're selected and if the problem still persists.
All right. Or even, to the point of Southern saying to the DOT, hey, and I'm sure for us, outside of the airline executive realm and the DOT realm, the only way we can do this is email. But I'm sure some of the higher up executives have the numbers at the DOT and, whatever. But I'm sure to some degree they could say, hey, we'd love to do this. But the FAA is dragging their feet. And I don't know if the DOT and the FAA could communicate in some way. But that might be the way to go at some point, because something is going to need to be done if they don't have those King Airs ready.
Absolutely.
Because I do think that Southern is going to get that contract for the sole purpose and the sole fact that it is more than half the price of Denver Air Connection.
Yeah, it's just about the same price that a boutique is getting subsidized currently.
Right.
Yeah. So moving on, we got Alpina, Michigan. The current provider is SkyWest, doing business as Delta Connection with service to Detroit. Nothing too interesting about this. The only interesting part that I noticed when researching this community is the employments, I believe, in 2015. I could be wrong. I'll need to check the year. But they had additional Minneapolis flights, and that actually brought in the most traffic that they had in their, and at least the history that I could look up since 2000.
Did you say Alpina had Minneapolis?
Yes, there was 1 year where they had both Minneapolis and Detroit flights.
Interesting. I know for a while, so Alpina and Pendleton is not that far from Alpina, and that's also an EAS city. For the longest time, those two cities were linked and tagged, and the plane went from Detroit to Alpina, and then to Pendleton, and then back to Detroit. And then the midday flight, each city would have its nonstop, and then at night, it would be a tag flight again. And just before the pandemic, or maybe a year before it, both cities got their own nonstop flights. And this, another interesting point, with United having all of their pilot issues on SkyWest and United brands, here we have a SkyWest city being re-upped for how many more years?
SkyWest hasn't made a proposal. Actually, let me double check that before I start saying things.
Oh, they didn't submit a proposal?
I believe we're in the request for proposal stages, but let me double check that.
I take back all comments about SkyWest making the proposal. Okay, so this is going to be an interesting one to look at. This is going to be the first Delta-branded SkyWest city that is up for renewal since United announced that pull-out of 29 cities. So this is going to be one to look at, because if SkyWest rebids under the Delta brand, then that means nothing is happening on the Delta side of it, and it's going to be all on the United side where all this crap is going down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. That's going to be interesting to watch for, and I wonder if anyone else is going to be putting in a bid proposal. Do you think anyone else will?
I think Boutique is going to throw their hat in the ring. Pendleton, like I said, Boutique threw their hat in the ring for Pendleton back when that was up for renewal a year or a couple of years ago. But of course, they didn't do it because I think it was roughly the same price. And of course, the community would rather have the jet service than go back to a propeller plane. Mm-hmm. And no matter who throws the hat in the ring, if Delta SkyWest is there, they're going to go for Delta SkyWest.
All right. Yeah, nothing else I have to say about that one. Moving on to one of the ones I'm actually a little more interested in, a little further south and west of Alpina is Manistee County Blacker Airport. This is an airport that's had quite the fond history. They're actually the first airport that participated in the alternate essential air service program back in 2012, and they are currently served by Cape Air, with service to Chicago O'Hare on their TechNem. One of the recent article came out a few months ago regarding reliability concerns, and Cape has stated that they are working with the community regarding the issue. There has been frequent 402 substitutions on the route, even though they are contracted for the 2012 Traveler, which is the new aircraft that Cape Air and Tecnam worked together to create. Taking a look at the historical enplanements compared to the performance now, you can definitely see an increase. The airport was averagely roughing 3,000 to 4,000 enplanements. In this past year, they reached 5,000 enplanements. But the concerns with Cape Air's reliability are interesting. What are your thoughts on how who's going to propose, and do you think the community will stick with Cape Air or look at other options?
This is going to be interesting. So before Cape Air was there, like he said, this was the first alternate essential air service city, and it was served by regional Sky under the North Country Sky brand. And this was one of those weird cities that had this airline that nobody's ever heard of, flying planes that usually people don't fly on. And they operated flights very sporadically throughout the week at random times on either a Dornier 328 jet or a Beech 1900C version to Chicago Midway. No interlines, no baggage agreements. And then they lost the contract to Cape Air. Manistee is no longer alternate air service or alternate essential air service, and they switched back to EAS under Cape Air. Under the Tecnom, and a lot of Cape Air cities are facing this exact same thing. Cape Air, unlike Denver Air Connection that says, hey, we'll fly, the 145 or the Doe jet. Cape Air is saying, hey, we are going to fly this route using the, like you said, the Tecnom 2012 Traveler. And it's a nicer, newer plane, and that's what they're bidding all their cities with, this nice, newer plane. And they're kind of saying to these cities, hey, look, if you go for us, we got a shiny, new-looking airplane. And I actually rode on the inaugural flight of Cape Air out of Manistee. It was on time for the most part. It took about an hour, 20 minutes on the Tecnom. Really nice plain USB ports. But like you said, the reliability, I'd say half of the flights in and out of that airport are on the Cessna 402. And every time I fly out of Chicago O'Hare, I go to their gate, and Manistee is always delayed when I'm there. Obviously, I don't know if I'm just going there at unlucky times or whatever, but whenever I fly through Chicago, it seems like Manistee is delayed or on the Cessna 402 or both. I have not, and I'm sure there's a time when it's been on time on the Traveler. I don't doubt that, because it's been almost 2 years since the start service began. That brings up another point. This is the furthest north that Cape Air has ventured in the Midwest. They do go further north in Maine, but this is the furthest north in the Midwest they go. And if the airport, and like you said, the airport is concerned about their reliability issue, they may very well go with another carrier. When are the proposals for this one due?
Let me search that up. Yeah, and that was a big point of why they moved away from regional Sky, not only the inconsistent schedules and interlines, but they actually had lots of reliability issues with the flights being delayed or canceled with no notice. And that's why they switched over to the Cape, the brand new aircraft and the reliability. So it looks like these proposals are due on April 21st.
Wow, there's a lot of contracts due in April. It's going to be an interesting month. Manistee is another one of those cities that has seasonality in their EAS contracts. In the fall, winter, and spring, they have two flights daily, two daily round trips to Chicago. And in the summer, it goes up to 4. And I see 3 airlines bidding. I see Cape Air rebidding. I see Boutique throwing their hat in the ring, because they did the same thing when the first time around about 2 years ago, when they were in the same instance. And I also see Southern Airways Express throwing their hat in the ring, because they did also bid for this city back the last time around when it was up for renewal. And it's going to be interesting because, and this city was actually a hot topic at that time, because I think 8 or 9 people in the community were recommending, or 8 or 9 comments from the community were saying, hey, we all want boutique because they're pressurized planes and, this and that. And then the community the town leaders recommended Cape Air. So with the majority of the people, I think it was like 8 or 9 community people, and then 2 or 3, like town council, airport board.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say 3 and 9, just to pick a number, because I think it's around there. 9 people recommended boutique, and then 3 people recommended Cape. But those 3 people do have a lot of say in the community, and the DOT ended up going for Cape Air for that and a couple of other reasons, which I can't think of at this moment. But the town council, if they're posting articles saying, hey, we're concerned about their reliability, they might very well go with Southern Airways Express on this one.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree, especially with this acquisition and showing how strong the reliability is. They can show, of course, the performance at the communities. Their Arkansas routes, I presume they'll promote a lot. It definitely makes sense to see that they don't have as many airline agreements, but they do have the ones that you need. American, United are the big two on that reliability.
And they even have Alaska. I mean, that doesn't help a lot in Chicago, but Alaska has expanded a little bit in Chicago. Now they offer Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and they also started Boise, Idaho out of Chicago. So now not only can you connect with United and American at their hub in Chicago, but you can connect at these in these other Alaskan cities. And a second ago, you mentioned Arkansas, the cities they serve down there. El Dorado, Hot Springs, and
Harrison.
And Harrison, thank you. I actually flew out of there. How did I forget that? I don't know. They offer weekend service between Hot Springs, El Dorado, and Harrison. They fly between those cities without going through the hub on the weekends. If Southern Airways gets multiple cities up in Michigan, then I could see them even like Muskegon down south. That's a 2.5-hour drive south. But if they get both of those cities, I'd be very interested to see if they offer weekend flights between Manistee and Muskegon even.
I could definitely see them doing that. They did, as we mentioned before, the special New York flights for Bradford. When they were proposing McCook and I believe Alliance, they were proposing special game day flights to Lincoln, I believe. And I believe there was a few other ones they did for different communities, but I can definitely see them doing that to kind of sweeten the deal for Manistee. So they could definitely make a big push to get that contract for sure.
Yeah, and Manistee itself, I mean, obviously, if people in the community hear me say that, they're going to kill me. Manistee itself is not big of a draw. But you have Traverse City, Michigan, 45 minutes or an hour drive north. That airport is notoriously known for super expensive airfares because of the very high-priced and exclusive golfing areas that are up in that region of the state, as well as the Cherry Festival. Traverse City is known as the cherry capital of the world, and their airport is even Traverse City Airport is Cherry Capital Airport. And I could very well see Southern Air, if they get Manistee, having, sort of seasonal flights or something like that where they offer special flights not only into Manistee, but flights from Chicago to Manistee and then continuing on to Traverse City for a weekend or two here and there. Just to kind of bring that into perspective.
Yeah, One of the interesting things the DOT mentioned about this contract is a very seasonal contract, so there's more frequencies during the summer and then less during the winter. I believe it averages out to three daily, 18 weekly, roughly.
Correct. Yes. In the summer, it is 28 flights a week, or 26 or 28. And then in the fall, spring, and winter, they're around 13 or 14.
Yeah, and you bring a great point about prices. Southern, that's another great draw. Is Southern, their big thing is they'll never charge you more than $100 for a ticket. So the low fares are going to be very attractive for potential service in the community.
Right.
I have to see, did Southern make a proposal before?
They did make a proposal for Manistee before, and what they actually, and what all of the carriers actually did is they bid Chicago, and then they also bid for, weekend or off-weekend flights to Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is another not hot airport, but it's another airport that is very much building the traffic as they get more and more flights and come out of the pandemic. They might hit that medium hub threshold at some point, and obviously the interline won't help that much for Grand Rapids as they are only flying between the hubs, but they do have flights on American to Dallas and Phoenix and Miami. American serves all of their hubs from Grand Rapids. So for people that don't want to go through Chicago and don't want to deal with Chicago, that stop in Grand Rapids could make it a little bit easy and a little bit less stressful for people that don't want to go to Chicago and deal with a massive airport and transferring there. They could very easily go through Grand Rapids, as well as the fact that Allegiant now has a base in Grand Rapids, and they fly to Boston, they fly to Los Angeles, they fly to Portland, Oregon, they fly to every city in Florida they operate to except for Palm Beach and Key West. Allegiant serves 18 nonstop destinations out of Grand Rapids, and that wasn't the case the last time that this contract was up for renewal. I think at that time they only served, 8 or 9, so it was still a bunch, but now Allegiant has a maintenance base, and they have a huge operation there, and the airport is going through renovations to expand one of their terminals, and they just built or are in the process of building a customs facility, and I expect Grand Rapids to be getting nonstop service to Cancun at some point in the future, maybe, hopefully the near future, and that could very much be a draw for flights to also operate to Grand Rapids from Manistee.
Excellent. So, great potential for Manistee to take a look at their air service and see if there's any improvements they can make. It'll be, I definitely think it'll be a battle between either Cape Air or Southern. I think it'll be between those two.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Cape Air just because they're there and, they have the knowledge and they've been there for a while, so they know what's happening and because they don't want to lose the city. And then Southern just because they're expanding a lot. While at the same time, this, like you said, the proposal is due on, you said, the 21st?
Correct.
Correct. That's 10 days after all 29 of those SkyWest cities that are being dropped. That's 10 days after those proposals are due. So by the time you get to Manistee and all these other cities that have their proposal due dates at the end of April or beginning of May, they may just flat out be saying, we don't know if we're going to have aircraft yet, so let's just hold off.
Definitely. Very, very good point. We talk a lot when we were talking about those SkyWest proposals about who's bidding for what, but we don't think about how is this going to affect other carriers, or not other carriers, other communities with bids coming up at the this year or even next, and how is this going to affect how SkyWest bids in the future? Because next year, the first few months, almost every contract coming up is SkyWest, and but a lot of those are on the chopping block for the list of communities they're terminating.
Great.
All right. So moving on to one of the final ones that's coming up, Dickinson. This is in North Dakota. The name sounds familiar. This town had a huge oil boom that brought in a lot of airline service. Delta actually temporarily had flights to Minneapolis-St. Paul, but those have since ended. SkyWest took over from Great Lakes about 10 years ago, a little before the town grew in popularity, and 2010 was actually the first year they ever reached 10,000 enplanements. Currently, the contract is held under United, flying under the United Express brand. And it looks like, I'm presuming this is going to be a very simple contract reselection. United does an exceptional job of growing the customer traffic, and I think they'll get an easy reselection. What are your thoughts? Any thoughts on that? Or
honestly, like you said, I think it's going to be very simple. If United rebids, United's going to get it. They're going with the jet service. It's going to be the easiest. And this is one of, I think, 3, maybe 4 cities that United themselves hold and not a regional carrier, like Presque Isle, Maine, Cody, Wyoming, and Dickinson, North Dakota. United holds this contract themselves. So what that means is United holds the contract, obviously, as I've stated multiple times, and they can choose any regional affiliate of theirs to serve it in any aircraft. Obviously, they're not going to slap a 737 or an A320 on the route because that's just stupid and kind of asinine. But that means they could see anything from a CRJ 200 on SkyWest out of Denver. What they could see, Commute Air, or does Commute Air still fly?
Yep.
They could see
I've seen
Commute
Air.
Air.
I used the 145.
Yep. I'm just confused with TSA and ExpressJet and who's still operating at this point. They could pick Commute Air and the E145. They could even pick GoJet on the CRJ 550 if they decide to open a GoJet base in Denver. Who knows? It could be any regional aircraft they want, or actually any aircraft. But, of course, like I said, they're not going to slap a 737 on that route because that's kind of ridiculous.
If they did, I would take it.
Oh, man, yeah.
So...
I've actually driven – when I lived in Seattle and I had to drive back to New York and Michigan, I actually drove through Dickinson and I spotted at that airport, and I lined it up with the airport for them to bring me out and spot an aircraft landing. And it was a TSA Trans-State Airlines E145, and I got a picture of them touching down amidst all the construction that was happening there in the summer of 2019. And it's really interesting to see what has happened because TSA served there with the E145, and then it was an ExpressJet, and now it's on to Commute Air. So it's just going from one E145 brand to another. And I think they tend to like the E145. They are better. Just that seems what like that has been what they are serving that airport with.
Agreed. Yeah, I saw a Trans-State aircraft a few months ago that I didn't know at the time was being repainted to the AHA livery, and I had to take a double take. I was like, wait a minute, that thing went bankrupt.
Yeah. AHA, when I first saw that, I thought their name was just I thought it was just a scream. I was like, I don't want to fly That sounds scary, but yeah.
That is such
a
weird airline name.
I'm like, wait, after I read it, I'm like, wait, there's another H there. We're good.
Oh, my goodness. All right, moving on to the next one. This is actually going to be one of the final two, which are the boutique rebids. Boutique announced at the start of the year that they are rebidding 2, or actually 3 of their routes. One is Shola, which we already covered. The other 2 being Pendleton and Altoona. Those are routes that they hold until the end of this year. They both expire December 31st. We'll talk about the first one, Pendleton, Oregon. Boutique was awarded that contract back in 2018 from Seaport, who went defunct and used the same Seaport used the 208. They occasionally use the PC-12 in a commuter configuration, which basically means all the seats facing forward, no lavatory, no snacks, drinks, anything like that. And even then, the reliability was very poor. So the airport board was really happy to get that changeover to the Boutique's PC-12. 2019 was a record year also for Boutique. They had the most employment for the last 12 years, back when Alaska had their Q400 on the Pendleton route. I believe that was a tag flight at the time. Right now, we are still waiting for the proposals. It actually comes out on the same day SkyWest bids are due, April 11th.
Jeez,
so
that's going to be a busy day.
It is going to be a very busy day.
So you said the recommendations are due the 11th, or the proposals are due the 11th?
The proposals.
Sorry, for Pendleton?
Correct.
Okay. First off, like you said, they're rebidding it at a higher. They said they're terminating service, and they're just going to rebid it at a higher bid. I know you said that, but just for people listening, I want to give some background on that. And the background is exactly what I just said. Altoona, Sholo, and Pendleton, they said they're terminating service, and they're going to rebid it at a higher subsidy due to all the increased costs. I like to point out that I think, I'm not going to swear, but I think this is a major F-up on Boutique's part, and it's kind of biting them in the butt here, because they just planned on, terminating and rebidding and getting more money, and they thought it was going to be all fine and dandy. But now what they're seeing in some of these cities is that's not the easiest thing, and it's not that easy. So with Pendleton, obviously Boutique is going to rebid. I know that 100%. They said they're going to rebid. I don't think Southern Airways is going to bid, just because then that would be another standalone hub. They already have one of those in Denver and LA/Vegas with Imperial. And I honestly don't think the airline wants to expand into another standalone hub. Could I be wrong? Yes, I could be. That area has had a lot of failed airlines. They had Penn Air. You said they had Horizon with Alaska. They had Seaport. All of these airlines just kind of went crapola. Who bid for that contract the last time? I'm not familiar with it.
That's a great question. Let's take a look. I can pull it up here quickly.
Because that's really weird. There are not that many. There are actually only 3 essential air service cities on the entire West Coast, or on states that are along the West Coast. There's Pendleton and Oregon. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, don't worry. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's Pendleton in Oregon, and then they have Crescent City and Merced in California. Oh, no, I'm sorry, and Imperial in California. Those are the only 4 EAS cities on the entire West Coast. And it's just weird, especially for these commuter airlines that have these small standalone operations out there away from everything else. And I just don't know who could bid for this other than Boutique. Southern, like I said, probably not, but they might.
The only other one I could think of, even close, would be Cape.
Yeah, Cape might. But again, they're having some troubles in Montana with reliability and pilot shortages, and they're starting to combine some of those routes. So I don't know if they want to build up another small standalone base. Honestly, I think it could possibly be just Boutique.
I agree. And once again, the proposal 4 years ago were 4 years ago, so these are outdated. But you will never believe the airline that proposed service to Pendleton. There was only 2. One was Boutique. Guess what the other one?
There's Boutique and Penn Air.
Oh, no. Well, you're close, actually.
Silver? What?
Silver Airways was service to Portland. I couldn't believe it when I saw it.
So weird. I don't know, and I don't think Silver would build a standalone hub, especially at this point in their history. They're building operations with the ATR, and I don't know if they want to expand any further out of the Southeast and maybe Texas.
I can't believe they did that in the first place.
It's going to be really weird, honestly. I don't know what's going to happen.
I do agree. I really think that's going to be it's just going to go back to boutique at a higher subsidy. From what I hear, the airport's happy with boutique. I don't think there's going to be any change in carriers. It sounds like reliability is good. So I personally don't think there's going to be a change. I don't see any reason. There hasn't been any local articles or anything about, or any community comments, anything indicating that something else would happen. Even if there was another bidder, I think it would go back to boutique. Which also, for, I would say those who don't know this, most people won't know this. I saw that the Western Aircraft, which is they own their own fleet as well as Part 145 Repair Center in Boise. They're starting their own. They're getting their own 135 certificate under the brand of JetSmart, and they're going to use PC-12s is what's proposed. Now, considering Boise is a big destination, and it sounds like Pendleton has wanted those Boise flights for a while. It sounds like they could be a potential competitor to boutique in that region. However, they don't have their 135 certificate, but it is in the process of being completed. So this could be, so this is a big move for boutique to secure a contract basically early before they could get their commuter certificate. I don't think that's the intent, but whether or not it is really good timing for them.
That JetSmart thing, that's giving me haunting nightmares. Well, not really haunting nightmares, but that's giving me a taste of, Air Charter Express and their random bid in Ogdensburg to Syracuse. This is what that is reminding me of. Just a random carrier nobody's ever heard of trying to start 135 operations to a city that is kind of big but isn't necessarily an airline hub. Yes, Alaska has built up a little bit of a focus city there, but it's not really an airline hub.
Well, the thing I know about Air Charter Express is I don't even see on the DOT site, I don't even see an application for their commuter air authority. They say they submitted it, but I don't see anything compared to Western, where I actually see their application. Which
honestly,
is interesting in itself.
I don't think any other carriers besides boutique and maybe JetSmart.
I think that's the name.
JetSmart. Yeah, I don't
figure out what that is now.
But so I don't see any carriers but boutique and maybe that mystery company bidding for this contract.
Yeah, and I think that they're doing the contract because they can do it before they get their certificate.
Right.
Let me see if I can find that. Sorry, that's not it. That's it. Once we get this, we'll move on to Altoona. Doing business as Jet Edge and Western Global Airlines.
Super weird.
Interesting. All right, so moving on to Altoona. Currently serviced by Boutique Air. They took over from Southern Airways Express at the end of 2020, starting service on June 1st, 2021. They provide service to Pittsburgh and Baltimore. They were requested by the community because of the improved aircraft as well as the rental cars that Boutique can provide. They are currently, once again, another community. Boutique is rebidding for a higher subsidy. Proposals are actually out. There are 3 of them. One from Southern, another from Air Charter Express, our one and favorite, and Boutique Air. I'm going to ignore Air Charter Express and move on to Southern. Southern is proposing Pittsburgh and Dulles service. One of the things I thought interesting about their proposal is they were really pushing their green initiative. They had a whole page dedicated to I can't remember the company. I think it's Ampere, a partnership which Mokulele started in Southern Heritage that is planning to change the power plant on the Caravan to an electric engine. And they even changed like the kind of the style of the proposal. Usually Southern's brand, they have a blue tail. They do a lot of blues. This proposal was the consistent theme. Everything was kind of green. And they had that whole part about the green initiatives. And so I thought that was something interesting. I haven't seen that in any other proposal Southern has done. And I think they did one proposal after they submitted Altoona that didn't have it. So they specifically did it for Altoona, I'm pretty sure. So I thought that was a really interesting thing that Southern was pushing when they were proposing for Altoona. Boutique is the standard bid Pittsburgh, Baltimore service. The only interesting thing about this, besides Southern's proposal, is the airport board already, as soon as the proposals came out, they requested an extension for the comment period, almost a month. So I believe the contracts came out early March. They were going to be due early April. Now they're asking for an extension to mid-May. So any changes won't happen for a while. And I was really curious to see why they made the change. It's possible that they were reviewing the performance of Boutique, the reliability, passenger numbers, something that Boutique promoted and Altoona recognized in their local newspaper is that they actually achieved the most passengers in Boutique's first year. They achieved the most passengers the airport's seen in about 10 years. So that's obviously going to come into consideration to improve performance. So what are your thoughts on it, Joey?
So I'm trying to think. I'm just going over in my head everything that you said in the past 5 minutes. Sorry. Hold on. So first, Boutique they just terminated it and said we plan on rebidding at a higher subsidy. This is one of those cases where I think this is biting them in the butt. They thought it was going to be cut and dry. They thought they were going to simply just get the proposal back for a higher bid. But now they extended that comment period, you said, till mid-May?
Correct.
So it's not as cut as dry as it seems, I guess, because the airport chose Boutique at first because of the aircraft and because they didn't really have good experience with Southern Air. And now they have Boutique that not so much at their airport, but are having all these other things happening at Jackson, Tennessee, Ironwood, Michigan, and all these other cities about reliability. And now Altoona, I can't say for sure because obviously I am not Altoona and I don't work for Altoona Airport or whatever in the board, but it seems they might be looking into this stuff as they requested the comment period to be extended. And they simply, I think they just want more time to think about it and look over their options to see which carrier is best other than Air Charter Express, which I guess we love. It's going to be coming down to those two carriers. And honestly, like I said, I love both carriers, but it seems like the community has not had a good experience with either of those, with Boutique's reliability apparently and Southern Airways, whatever they had issues for them. It may just come down to the lesser of two evils with this decision. And like you said, their employment numbers, that is very impressive. Despite the issues that Boutique is having, I'm very impressed that the numbers that they are pulling out of Altoona is better or are the best numbers they're having in the past 10 years, especially considering they started Altoona in the middle of the pandemic. When did they start this route? I want to say September or something of 2020?
January 1st, 21.
All right, so yeah, not even a year into the pandemic, so about a year and 3 months ago, they started this route in the middle of the pandemic, right around when the vaccines were coming out-ish. So that is really good that those numbers are so high, despite being in the middle of the pandemic when most airports are having the worst of their enplanements during that time, especially being in the winter. Not only did Boutique start in the middle of the winter, with those of you not familiar with the Northeast United States, the winters are not the most fun for people that don't like the cold weather. They get a lot of snow and a lot of cold, and it lasts from September until May. Just kidding, not really. But in the middle, for a route to start in the middle of the winter, and not only during the pandemic, but to have it at the low point of the travel year, that they pull these numbers out, it's very impressive of what Boutique can do when they have the reliability and the planes and everything's going smoothly. It is something that the company can do. And honestly, I still think they may end up choosing Boutique in the end.
Interesting. Yeah, it's going to be a lot closer than they hoped for, but I do agree. I think Boutique will come on top for this and keep the four contracts that they currently have. But it's not going to be easy by any means, for sure. For those that are interested in the Air Charter Express proposal, it is on the Piper Chieftain at the same frequencies as the other carriers, same Baltimore to Pittsburgh. And it's actually a reasonable subsidy, so look at that.
All right, and yeah, this is one of those contracts where we're not going to hear or talk about it for a while, because those contracts aren't due until the middle of May. So the Altoona is just kind of going to go silent while all of the SkyWest stuff is going down.
That's interesting. I wonder if that has a factor in it. So I looked at the comments. The comments were extended from April 11th to May 13th. So there's an exact date for you.
All right. So May 17th or May 18th, we're going to see some very interesting comments coming out about Altoona and
the future of their air service. All right. Well, that concludes all the items on our topic list today. I know it's been a long one. Thank you very much to Joey for joining me on this very interesting adventure.
Did we talk about Sholo?
Yeah. Well, we talked about Sholo and it kind of.
Oh yeah, that's right. We did.
Yeah, I kind of glanced over it. They got the recommendation from the city to go to Southern. So, is there anything you want to talk about?
No, I was just going to say this is the prime example of them trying to rebid at a higher price. It's biting them, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, now I kind of remember talking about it.
The only point with that one is they actually had the proposals come out. They had the proposals, and then they did the rebid.
They're rebidding?
Yeah, so they did the whole 90-day terminating service after the proposals came out, which was interesting. Yeah, and they basically the DOT just said, we're just going to hold you in until the conclusion of the active essential air service case. So I don't know if they're just going to allow them to or if they're just going to hold them in until the end of their contract. Or it was really weird timing. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they're just like, all right, they've done this already with Pendleton and Altoona. Let's just post all this crap at the same time. Let's just do it all at once. Probably one of those things. Yeah,
definitely. It was a really, really strange. It wasn't like the DOT didn't say they wanted to rebid the contracts. They just said, we're just going to hold you in until the conclusion of the current EAS selection case. So,
okay.
Yeah. Any concluding thoughts from you?
Not really, other than so I guess I do. These proposals are going to be other ones that are interesting to watch. They're going to be happening, Altoona is going to be quiet for a while, middle of May. Pendleton's going to be due around the same time as all the SkyWest stuff. Or, 10 days after the SkyWest. And then Sholo's, honestly, we're just waiting for the word on the DOT about who got the Sholo contract. So, I forgot the other two. Oh, yeah. Manistee. Man, I don't remember anything right now.
Okay, there's a lot going on, and this month is just going to be, it's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
There's so much going on, so many contracts. with so many different situations.
Yeah, for those that don't know me, I run my YouTube channel. It's aviation. It's essential air service stuff and also non-essential air service stuff. A lot of my news that I write about on airlinegeeks.com tends to focus on essential air service. Obviously, I write about other stuff, but I tend to like my essential air service stuff as it's kind of my niche. I don't know.
Niche.
But I love this stuff and I love talking about it, but even I'm having a hard time keeping my head on straight with all of the stuff happening at once. Contract dates on 4 different days in April and May, and everything's in a different place in the bidding process. It's just hard keeping all of this stuff in line, and the mid part of April is just going to be chaotic, trying to find out what is due, what bids are coming out, who got what. And it's just going to be a very interesting time this next 2, possibly even 3 months. It's going to be very interesting for the essential air service scene in the United States, and it's really going to possibly set the stage for the next couple of years. Because like we said, we could, over the past 5-6 years, we've slowly moved away from propeller planes and small 30-seat jets into, 50-seat CRJs and E-145s and whatnot. And this could be, not to get all philosophical, but this could be the day of reckoning for the essential air service program. We could make all of a sudden, we could poof right back to, 10, 15 years ago, when 50% or more of these cities in the U.S. are now being served by 8-seat propeller planes once again. And we could slowly start seeing it go back to what it was 10, 15 years ago, when all of these many different airlines that nobody has heard of, I mean, I've heard of them, but that's because I probably pay way too much attention to them than I should. But I don't know where I was going with that sentence, so I'm just going to end it there, saying thanks.
You're all good. And I'll definitely be attaching some of your videos on throughout this video of the different essential air service. Since you've been to a lot of these markets in person, you've seen the service firsthand, so you know a lot about.
With the exception of maybe a SkyWest pilot, I would say I have been to more essential air service airports than most people, or than anyone. I'm not giving a title to myself, but I've been told by other people that I'm the EAS king. I don't know how true that is, but I have been to 39 essential air service airports in the United States. I don't know why I say the United States, because all of the essential air service airports are in the United States. So let me rephrase that. I've been to 39 EAS airports in the lower 48, in Alaska, and as well as Hawaii. I've been to 3 in Hawaii, been to 4 in Alaska, and then the rest of them were in the lower 48. And I've been on pretty much every essential air service carrier with the exception of Contour. And I've been to all corners of this country on these small planes, and it's just so unique to see the program, how desolate and abandoned some airports are and how busy the others are.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you again for joining us today. I hope everyone enjoyed this first insight into the Essential Air Service podcast. It's a lot of fun talking about all the news that are happening in this portion of the industry. And it's going to be interesting, as you said, Joey, yourself. It's going to be interesting to see how this moves forward, if we're going to see this huge resurgence back to propeller flights, or which way it directs, because there's no way we're going to know until April 11th, and we'll see what happens from there.
Absolutely, and thanks for having me on, and I'm 100% sure I will be back on this podcast at some point.
Excellent. Well, we'd love to hear that. Our next one's going to be planned coming up in just over a week, when we cover all the SkyWest proposals that come out once the DOT release is done. Our next scheduled one, however, covering just our typical essential air service coverings, will be out this summer. More information will be on the different social media channels below. I'll also make sure to include all the links to Joe Gerardi's aviation account on YouTube, as well as his link to his Airline Geeks page, as well as some of the other relevant videos and contracts that we went over in today's site. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.